from going there? Fear. No, I know that, but that's not what kept him from going there. What freezes you from moving? Fear.
Based on your belief, though.
I'm not saying it's not. But fear is the boundary, is what I'm trying. Because there is no other boundary. There really isn't a boundary there. The illusion is producing what in you? Which puts the brakes on. And what I want you to see is every boundary you have in your current reality is based on fear. Well, but see, that's lack of boundary is relative. There's got to be a boundary to be lack of boundary. That's the duality thing. See? And there's only a boundary if you create one. Because even on the earth, we say that there are boundaries around countries. There's no boundary. We say there are boundaries between individuals. There's no such thing as individuals. Separation's an illusion. See, all boundaries are illusions. See? And the only reason you need a boundary is you created it out of fear. It's real hard to comprehend, but it is the reason. Because and I would venture to say that most psychologists would agree that every feeling of discomfort is really based on fear. The true source of any type of discomfort has its source in fear. Why do you feel uncomfortable? Not necessarily fearful, but at first you'll feel uncomfortable when somebody starts messing with your reality. If you keep going, what's the next level going to bring? Fear. It leads to fear. All right, while you're thinking about that. But when Columbus ventured out, he didn't find an edge, did he? And isn't that edge the same thing as the horizon we were talking about earlier? Yeah, the horizon was the edge they were looking at. So where does that really exist? In your mind. Yeah. All right. But if you believe what your eyes or perception tell you, you'll never venture out, see? You're not going to venture out. Because you're afraid you're going to fall off the edge. And I'm being metaphorical now, right? You understand that? So that imaginary edge that really doesn't exist has become your experience boundary. You know, could they ever experience the rest of the world if they believed in the edge? See? Your beliefs are your edges. Your belief systems are your edges. And every one of them are not absolutes, they're created concepts. We contradict ourselves all the time, don't we? Oh, nothing's impossible. Sky's the limit. But you still have edges. You still have belief systems that say inside, well, you know, that's nice. But there's something inside you that still fears to go out into the ocean and see if it exists. You're still afraid to go search for the edge. And it hits me every time I talk about this that we don't realize we're no different than the people in Columbus's day. Absolutely no different. We have different concepts than they do, but the same truth. As long as you believe what your eyes are telling you, You're no different than that. Not a bit different. See? Because everything that you see with your eyes in is actually constantly changing. Nothing is permanent. Remember what I said Paul said last week? What you see with your eyes is temporary. But what you do not see is what? It's eternal. And what is that? What's that? What did we say earlier? Energy. The energy is the only constant. Why is this important? Why is what I'm telling you important? Why do you think it's important? Because if you have permanent, absolute belief systems, can they be changed if they're permanent to you? No, it can't be changed. Isn't that why you're here? Remember what I said is common last week? Everybody wants things to change, but they don't want to change one thing.
Yeah.
You'd like to keep the same reality, but still have a different one. Well, that sounds sane,
you want to have
doesn't
a home, but you want to venture out anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's the only get safe place at home.
Yeah.
But that's the point. There is no home. There is no home. That's a created concept. See? And if you're tied to home, you'll never go out across the ocean to find out what's. Think about it. What would have been if nobody would have
gone with him.
I'm always wondering how you got to go with him. That's what I've always wondered. How do you ever get them to
Well, but
Well, they
it's just
believe
like in
the
any
same
time.
thing.
Huh?
Yeah.
They had the same beliefs.
Well, I think they trusted him
Yeah.
enough. That's
Aren't
what
there-
they believed. I think they trusted him enough.
But no, don't you think that there? Who do you think you have in present? Don't you have Columbuses in your present day right now? People that are venturing out where other people won't go because they're afraid, and they're finding out that the edge is an illusion. That reality is an illusion, and coming back to try to help you see that. So your own little limited reality is not the only thing you'll ever experience. See? Okay. Any definition, rule, or law is the edge of your earth or reality. And this is because you've believed what appears to be true, and that becomes your current perception. See? And this defines your reality or your boundary of experience. What really defines a boundary that we won't cross, and I just said this earlier, I used to have this happen, I get ahead of myself. Fear. And your fear is of your current existence where you feel safe will have an end. Can you apply that to the Columbus thing, see? Your fear is that your current reality is going to end. That's where you feel safe. Okay. Now this is interesting. I never thought about this before, but we're going to talk a little bit about Adam and Eve again. And y'all know the story. So you'll relate to this. But I want you to get how created concepts creates fear. I'll set it up for you because I remember the Bible story and you do too. It actually made a point to say this in Genesis, that Adam and Eve were naked, but they didn't know it. Remember that? Actually, it says they weren't ashamed. They were naked, didn't know it. Okay. Then what happened, and this is metaphor, when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Actually, well, that's true. Now, do you remember what they did when they heard God walking in the garden? Fear. Yes, but why? Fear. And he even asked them why. They said, because we were naked. And you know what he said next?
How do you know?
Who told you? In other words, God is saying, who defined that concept for you? Who defined that created concept for you? See, naked didn't exist before that. And the only reason we can relate to it is because we've been taught about naked. Do you understand what I'm saying? The only reason we can see the difference between naked and clothed is because we've been brought up that way and taught the concept of naked and clothed. But that was the very first boundary. If you believe that was the beginning of existence, in a sense. That was the first concept. That was the first definition. That was the first boundary. And what did it create? Fear.
Because they were told not to eat it was fruit.
Yeah.
So that wasn't fear.
When you told them not to? Well, obviously they weren't afraid to because they did.
Then they did. So then fear came.
See, they weren't afraid to eat from the fruit.
But wasn't that a boundary?
It wasn't a boundary to them because they did it. They didn't accept it as a boundary.
That was a boundary till they told not to look back.
Well, I'm not saying that God didn't tell them, but now you're missing. Now maybe you'll get the point.
Because they did it. Then once they realized they defined naked, that
They weren't even in fear because they ate from the tree. They told him, we ran and hid because we were naked. And we were ashamed. They even said we felt ashamed and we ran and hid because we were naked. Didn't say because they ate from the tree. And again, think about this. A boundary isn't a boundary unless you define it as a boundary. Or accept the definition as a boundary. Now, I know most of you could not even conceive of this. But everybody in here has a boundary about being naked. Don't you? You couldn't sit here naked, could you? No. But let me ask you this question.
Travis, if you ask us to become nudists, we're out of here.
Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do that.
He's got a boundary too.
Well, but think about this, and this is where I was going to go with this. Think about, though, do babies care? In fact,
They love it.
In fact, when you try to put clothes on them,
They run.
don't they try to?
Yeah.
But don't they take them off?
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this question. I know you already have pre-wired definitions and concepts, but if they were never taught that they needed clothes, would there ever been a problem? And if none of us were, would we ever have a problem with being naked? The only reason you can't sit here naked right now, and see, the reason you joke about it is because it's uncomfortable. Do you know that's why you joke? Do you know that's why you do this stuff? Is your ego is saying, I'm uncomfortable, I have to wait to deal with this. But the only reason is because you were taught to wear clothes and that it was bad to be naked when you get older. There are societies in Africa, there are tribes that don't wear clothes. They don't have any problems with that. And there's no problems in the society. Now, I'm not promoting that you get naked. Don't miss the point. Don't let the extreme example cause you to miss the point. Because you know what you're doing again? Subconsciously, you are resisting your current reality is fighting to be maintained right now. That's why you're having problems right now. You would have problems. Would you have problems walking around in an African tribe that were all naked? You didn't have to be naked, but if you had your clothes on, would you have a problem doing that?
Did them being told not to eat of that tree have anything to do with them eating of the tree?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. That's kind of off the
Well,
subject.
we had discussed before not to use the word do not.
Well, and that's actually a good point. The fact that they were told not to made them want to. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. That's very possible.
It wasn't because they needed it for the food.
No.
Because
Well, there was only
plenty
one
of
person
everything.
telling them do not. So
Yeah.
Do you really
You
think
think
there was a
God would
literal fruit? I don't think there was.
No. There wasn't a fruit.
No.
It says, did you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? It doesn't even say fruit,
Right.
I don't think.
Everybody's
Or maybe the
made
fruit.
this into an apple or whatever.
But see, I did a study throughout this whole thing about that. Did you know the Bible says, and Jesus said this, a man shall eat the fruit of his mouth. Words. See, the real fruit is words. Knowledge. Wasn't it the tree of knowledge? See, so, and Jesus said, a man shall eat the fruit of his mouth. It's not what goes in a man that defiles him, he said. It's what comes out. Your words are you're eating the fruit when you speak the words, see. Now, I didn't want to get too far off, but the reason I'm using an extreme example is I wanted you to feel uncomfortable.
You think God really told them not to eat of the fruit all the time? Do you think that was, like she said, that you really want to, but you told not to? Is this what really happened?
Well, I wasn't there. But my point is, well, yeah. I mean, I'm not consciously aware of it right now.
Okay, I just wanted to some of the meaning to all that.
I personally believe that he wanted them to.
Like you wanted,
But he wanted them to make the choice.
like Jesus wanted Judas to betray him. This is so much for you.
Now again, let's not get out of context of what I've taught you in the past that you may not still grasp or understand, or you may not have integrated into your current reality. But this is all just a big act on stage. This is just a big play. Don't take it too seriously. But, and I know you have all these questions about that situation, but I don't want to get off where I want to go. You know, I don't want to take a path that we might get off and not get back. But what I wanted you to see is I'm going to give you a physical illustration here in a second of that. Some of you are, I can sense it from you right now. You're actually in a bit of fear right now. You're feeling some fear. And every time I bring up anything about giving up your current reality, I feel the fear. Yeah, and that's not bad. I'm not putting you down. I'm trying to make you an observer. That's why I'm pointing it out to you. Otherwise, you'll get caught up in the fear and you'll run back. You'll run away. You'll go hide in the bushes like Adam and Eve. Because if I take your current reality away from you, you're going to feel naked. Aren't you? Those are your clothes, if you want to think about it. Your current reality,
Home, your job, your family.
that's your clothes right now. And you'd feel real naked without it. See? And that's okay. There is no wrong or right in this. I'm just trying to make you aware of it. And you can change clothes. See, you can change clothes anytime you want. But don't you want to be able to escape this current reality? Don't you want to?